Afternoon, Gary.
Oh, hello, sir. Listen, I've got this. So if I told you an idea for a film script and it went that this guitarist had this extraordinarily brilliant guitar, Gibson, Les Paul, and it was very famous. And then it was on a plane that crashed on takeoff, completely blew up, and no one could find anything in the wreckage. And then 32 years later, he found the guitar. Do you think that would be a good movie, wouldn't it?
That would be a good movie. It would be a series. It's a Netflix. It's a 10-parter, frankly. I believe the guitar went on to become named the Phoenix, which it literally is.
It did. It's crazy. And
also, because the guitar in question, I know, was always a big deal to me. Actually, I'm probably going to mention it because it's the first. Because I when Frampton Comes Alive came out. Oh shit! I've given the name away.
It's all right. I think he's on the front page of this.
Yeah, it's the first Les Paul I ever saw with 3 pickups, and I was just thinking, wow, 3 pickups.
But
yeah,
Jimmy Page had one, didn't he? He had a Black Beauty with 3 pickups at one point.
Well, Townsend played 3 pickup Les Pauls as well sometimes, but yeah, I'd never seen one. And they used to see a lot of them. A lot of the old acts from the 50s actually had 3 pickup ones, but they didn't seem to be a thing. We're getting too techie now, aren't we? We need to pull out.
Well, we'll have to ask the man himself.
We will have to ask the man. But more to the point, I hate you knowing anything about the Who that I don't. I hate that.
Okay, welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Okay, guys, I'm ready.
Well, it's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
You know, what people forget about Bowie is that he was such a kind man.
Remember me? I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah.
Get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Okay, we're on now, though. It's all going good.
Peter, this is Gary. I know you were meant to be on tour in England, weren't you? Britain, this horrible time when everyone's had to cancel. And obviously it was meant to be your final tour. How's things been for you?
Well, that was obviously not thrilling, but I can't complain because of obviously everybody else and what we're all in the same boat basically, except we're in a much bigger boat here in America, with a big hole in it. And it was. I think the thing that upset us most was that we all left all the British and European dates in our calendars, so that every day, you wake up and it comes, bing, this is what you're doing today.
Yes, we'll have that.
Oh, God. So when the Albert Hall came up, we all called each other and moped because we were supposed to be, I've never played the Albert Hall myself, so it was going to be a big deal. I really hope we can do it again, or reschedule it. But
well, we have exactly the same story because Guy and I play with Nick Mason, and we were meant to be doing the Albert Hall as well, which has got moved till next year. So, I mean, none of us know. How are you feeling? How are you feeling, though? Are you feeling okay?
Yes, I'm doing okay. It's the IBM, inclusion body myositis, which is what I have, is a very slow-moving disease with me. I'm lucky, but it is starting to affect my hands a little bit. But I think I play with adrenaline, not with my fingers. So I think it's okay. Yeah, I'm doing all sorts of different therapies and everything to try and slow this stuff down. There isn't a cure yet. There's not a pill, but the great thing is that what we raised from the American and Canada finale tour was a lot of money, over $300,000 from people each promoter donated a dollar for each ticket. And and they each promoter had to send them in. It wasn't like Live Nation did it for you. So they were all very, very good about doing that. And so now we because of that, we're starting some new drug trials soon at Johns Hopkins. So
brilliant. Well done, you.
I'm in business with them basically on that.
I'm hoping you can get back in action, obviously. I mean, your guitar playing, growing up as a kid, I think the first time I ever heard you, although I was probably not fully aware of you, was on Rocking the Fillmore, the Humble Pie record.
Yeah.
And you had these jazz chops, you know, this kind of strange modal style that you played in, which was really unlike everyone else in the business. I mean, what was the inspiration for you?
Well, it was really when I was in the Herd and we were all like going gaga over Eric Slowhand at that point. Eric is God on every train overpass, you know, and around London. And it was obviously everyone was so seduced by Eric's playing because it's incredible, especially Blues Breakers and then Cream.
Beano,
yeah, man. I mean, so the sound, the guitar, everything. Anyway, so I suddenly realized that everyone that I knew was carrying a Beano and and looking awfully like Eric Clapton. And then they would get out this, you know, Les Paul, and they'd sound like him, but it wasn't him, obviously. And I thought, you know what? I could get drawn into this very easily with just the blues, which I love, obviously, and play the blues myself. But I just decided at that point, round about the Herd and then going into Humble Pie, to just listen to Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, George Benson very early with Jack McDuff.
Oh, very cool.
And of course, my father and mother during the war and pre-war, their Beatles was Django Reinhardt, you know, and the Hot Club de France. So when I finished playing my Shadows album in the living room when we got our first record player, I would get that rush off to my room, you know, to learn the licks and everything. And then I would hear this horrible music coming, as my kids used to call it. Dad's listening to that silent movie music again, you know, so... and yeah, exactly. So, but the thing was that after I'd played the Shadows record each time, and Dad would say, "You done? I want to put on my Django," and so I would get, I wouldn't get more than a few steps out the door, and I'd hear this lick, and I'd go, "Holy crap, what's that? This guy's good." Even though it's not a Stratocaster, it's through a Vox amp. It's this guy's good. So in the end, it was a 2-album thing. Me and my dad would bonded over the Hot Club de France with Django and Stéphane Grappelli. So that's been Hank Marvin and Django have been my two favorites, you know, from the word go. You know, so that's where it sort of all stemmed from. I was introduced to the jazz part, and then just decided, you know, I was going to go full in. You know.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because you came from a different place than, so it wasn't like the jazz rock thing that happened, that sort of about 70, wasn't it? Or when was Bitches Brew? So your jazz thing was much deeper rooted than that.
Yes, it was more, well, not traditional. It's not traditional jazz, but I mean more early playing before the fusion came in, you know, and all that. So yeah, no, it was earlier than that, and I listened to. I mean, the first band, sort of semi-pro band that I joined before the Herd. I mean, I remember the drummer gave me. He asked me if I joined the band. I said, "Well, I'm still at school." He said, "So I can only do Fridays and Saturdays," and so he said, "Well, look, come over. I got this bunch of albums," and it was Otis Blue, Roland Kirk, Mose Allison, Miles Davis, the Rolling Stones. You know, it just went on and on through every genre. So, and he said, "Have that down by Tuesday." I said, "Okay." So it was a forced but I enjoyed every moment of it, going in and dissecting everything.
But I love the period at that time, the mythology surrounding people actually owning vinyl, that someone, people would all travel. Isn't there a story where, one of the Beatles goes somewhere far away and meets Keith Richards and Mick Jagger just to listen to some record that's just been imported?
Exactly.
They were rarities, weren't they?
Yeah, and writing down catalogue numbers, wasn't it? Everything was about catalogue numbers.
I remember when Humble Pie formed, and I believe either Mick or Keith had told Steve Marriott about the Grigri album, Dr. John's album, and and obviously that was to become a big thing for us because we did Gilded Splinters on the live album, and so it was yes, a lot of stuff because at that point still radio wasn't that great. The BBC used to add like 5 songs a week or something. But I mean, there were other stations by then, but it was still, word of mouth. Try this album, see what you think. Yeah, absolutely.
But if anyone's wondering what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Peter's style of guitar soloing, I can only direct them to Shine On the Rock On album, the Humble Pie album, because that solo you pull off in there is like, the band starts off and you think, well, this is kind of Zeppelin style, and then you play a solo that's just from heaven. It's out nowhere. No one's doing that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's Stone Cold Fever you're talking about.
Stone Cold Fever, thank you, not Shine On.
Yeah. Shine On, I don't think I did a solo on that one. But anyway, no, Stone Cold Fever was the realization when I was tracking with the band in Olympic with Glenn Johns, and we were taking a while to get it down. So I said, I can't play any more solos, if we're not going to keep any of them. So I stopped and the 3 of them cut the track. And then I just went out and played the solo, I believe, afterwards. And when I came in and listened to it, everyone was sort of saying how they loved it and everything. And I just thought, I think I've just found me. That day when one day...
Oh, okay, yeah.
One day, I hope I have a style that I can recognize and others can recognize as being me. And that was the beginning. That session for Stone Cold Fever, I think, was the most important one for me.
Oh, and you did... Well, sorry, you're working out of the box. That's really what's been so beautiful. Sorry, Guy.
No, that's fine. I was going to say the interesting thing, because you were a few years... Because all this stuff that doesn't matter now, when you're really young, like just a couple of years can be all the difference. Because everyone you were working with was just a few years older than you, weren't they?
Yes. I was always the youngest in the band until recently.
When you were 17, weren't you? In the Herd, you were 17 or something.
Yeah.
18, I think.
Yeah, I joined the Herd when I was 16. We became, we had a hit when I was like 17 or 18, yeah. And Humble Pie was 19 when I joined Humble Pie.
God, that's insane. What was that like? How did it feel? What was the touring and everything like?
With Humble Pie? Well, that was the most exciting band, the best band I've ever been in, because first of all, I'd seen the Small Faces on Ready, Steady, Go when they first came out and did What You Gonna Do About It live. And I just remember that Gretsch solo with the whammy bar with Steve, and then that voice. And my jaw dropped, and I just said to myself, oh God, I'd love to play guitar with him, And I was probably just starting to be in the Herd at that point, So, and then of course, when we actually, Steve and Ronnie Lane called up Andrew Bound from the Herd and said, look, we've heard you're having a few problems with management and rip-offs and all this money, and we've been through that. Have we been through that? And we're with Andrew Oldham and Immediate now. Would you like to come and talk with us? So we went down to Marlow, which is where they were living, down the M4, and they told us all about Andrew. They told us all about the stuff they'd been through and ripped off. And it was, with similarities. And so that's when virtually Andrew went back to London, and I kind of stayed. And I went down every weekend, and Steve and I really hit it off musically, and I found him a very exciting character, obviously, and this immense talent.
But then didn't Ronnie Lane call you and ask you to go and join the Faces or something?
Yes, it was because Steve called me the night he left the Small Faces, and he said, "Can I?" Because he was helping me put a band together at that point. We had Jerry Shirley drums, and I was looking for bass and guitar, and so Steve was helping me, and so he called me and said, "Look, I just left the Small Faces. Can I join your band?" And I said, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Because I kind of thought that I was going to be joining the Small Faces. That's what it was, the way it was going, because I'd just done a session with them for Johnny Halliday in Paris. And it was phenomenal, the five of us, I mean, it was my dream come true. I joined the Small Faces for a week. Steve says, "Can I join your band?" And I said, "Oh my God." So I said, "Yeah." And then, he said, "I've got Greg Gridley, wants to jump ship with Spooky Tooth." Oh, wow. I played with Greg, Spooky Tooth a lot. And so I said, "What a band." So, and then the following day, Steve called back with some names. We were all and he said, "Humble Pie." I said, "Oh my God, that's it," And so then I get a call from Ronnie Lane that he never told the others about this, because I've spoken to Kenny about this recently. He never told the others, but he said, "Well, Pete, what do you think about taking Steve's place?" I said, "Ronnie," and I loved Ronnie. I said, "That could never work, because I don't have those kind of shoes I can't fill those shoes." And secondly, Steve's left the band and your band, and we formed a band yesterday, And I said, but the sad thing was, I said, "Ronnie, we could have all been in the same band." So that's what it, but anyway, it took two people to replace Steve, as I thought it would, at least.
Yeah.
So,
True.
that's how it all started. Yeah.
I mean, Guy, you must have. I mean, that was one of the most important albums in my collection, Rockin' the Fillmore back in there.
Rockin' the Fillmore, yeah, no, absolutely, and also, yeah, because obviously I've revisited it for this, and it's Humble Pie are absolutely one of those bands that when you go back, you just go, "My God, how good was that?"
I mean, it swung, didn't it? It swung. There weren't many rock bands who could swing like that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a special band. It was one that and of course, later on, Steve and I did get back together and write and record a few tracks, but then, of course, we lost him in the accidental fire.
What was the inspiration for that band? Because I mean, obviously Jerry Shirley was an amazing drummer, could swing as well. But I mean, was it Delta? Was it that sort of Memphis sound you were trying to go for, or where's the influence?
I think that we were listening to a lot of the Bill Black combo.
Oh wow!
And basically everything, from Dr. John to Leaving Trunk. Who did that track? Great blues artist. I'm terrible. I'm 70. I can't remember.
My brother and I love that album so much. I mean, we love. But the one line that always stuck with us when we were touring with Spandau Ballet was, "We go home on Monday, but I want to tell you, we've really had a gas this time. It's really gas."
But the thing is for all the blues and the swing in it was actually, what was incredible was that it was such a heavy sound. The guitars were huge and everything, and yet it was still very light on its feet
with no keyboard.
Well, either Steve or I played keyboards when we needed it. Sometimes I would, play organ, he'd play guitar, even live, or vice versa. So,
But listen, Peter, forget that album. You went on and made the biggest live album ever, and I just sort of, to fill you in as a teenager, listening when Frampton Comes Alive came out, and it was such a massive hit everywhere. I was kind of bemused because I didn't think I'd ever really focused on your Frampton Comes Alive solo career. Because that album was just massive, more massive than anything else, wasn't it?
Well, it was like we were all discovering. It was a very, very important record for me, Peter. I'd actually literally just started playing the bass, and I wanted a fretless and a kimono after I got that album.
Stanley Sheldon,
Stanley Sheldon, and also we were talking about this before. It's the first time I'd ever seen a Les Paul with 3 pickups, which I just thought was the coolest thing ever. Because the big thing, I remember at the time, because there was a lot of scrambling for like, whoa, Peter Frampton, where did Peter Frampton come from? And then of course, you had this amazing history. And of course, it's him from Humble Pie. But there was this big thing of how you'd been everyone's favourite support act for a couple of years, which seemed a bit to me, but it was like, because it was so, I mean, that must have really taken you by surprise, did it? Or
yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we knew, because I just followed the template of Humble Pie. Rock On was while I was with the band, was our best solo studio record. And it did actually sell some copies, probably the first of the Humble Pie albums to sell pretty well. And so we knew that the follow-up would be, if it was good, would eclipse that. Management, record company said, look, your live shows, you're drawing more people than you're selling records. Why don't we do a live album? So we did a live album, and that was sort of the best of everything we'd done so far. And so I followed that template with my album Frampton, which was the one before the live album, was also, it's the same kind of thing. 4th album, same as Humble Pie, and it did actually sell, 250,000 copies on its own. So I knew I'd made a dent, but and no one said anything. We just went, as if to say, it's the live album time, you know.
Yeah.
And so we did exactly the same thing. And of course, I remember going away in January, just before 76, when it came out, because I knew we'd be touring all year. So I went away for a 10-day vacation down in the islands. And then before I went, we had one show sold out at Cobo Hall in Detroit, which is about, I guess it's 7 to 10, something like 1,000. And when I came back 10 days later, we had 3 shows or 4 shows sold out. And that's when I went, ooh, something's going on here. What's going on? Well, the album's zooming up the charts. That's what's happening. So, yeah. And then, of course,
I think part of the reason that you've made 2 of the greatest live albums ever, you've been on 2 of the greatest live albums ever, is maybe it comes out of the fact that you were in bands where someone brought a song in, and within 2 or 3 run-throughs of the song, you were recording it. It was going on the album. You never really had time to really flesh it out. And as you went on the road, the song got better and better and better.
Exactly.
Well, it's also players who can cut it. It's as simple as that, isn't it? Players who can cut it live.
Exactly. But then, Humble Pie went on to do, which is my favorite Humble Pie album, which I'm not on, which is Smoking. And of course that had enormous hits on it for Humble Pie. But there's various bands, I think, that, I liken Humble Pie a little bit to The Who, not their style of music, but just the fact that that The Who makes great records, Humble Pie made great records. But if you really want to experience The Who or Humble Pie, you have to see them live.
Yeah.
And there's something extra that happens. I think for me,
Live at Leeds is one of the great albums as well, isn't it? Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the thing for me is when I walk onto the stage, there's nobody else is going to say, well, I think you ought to try. Why don't you do? No, it's all down to you and the audience. And it was a learning curve for me all along the way. And I learned, how I really love interacting with an audience. And I think they always get more, live from me than anywhere else, you know, so it's that.
Yeah, but also we're talking about how quickly you used to write songs, but didn't you write I Don't Need No Doctor in the sound check at Madison Square Gardens and then play it that night?
Yes.
I mean,
Well,
can you
obviously,
imagine that happening now, Guy? I mean, there's no, we'd have to go to each other's houses.
But yeah, no, do you mind? We're trying to get keyboard levels.
yeah, the story, I'll make it brief, but the story is, obviously it's an Ashford and Simpson song that they wrote that Ray Charles cut first. And anyway, it's our first time at Madison Square Garden. We're supporting Grand Funk or someone like that. And they actually gave us a sound check, which was unusual. So my amp's up, Jerry's drums are up, and they're working on Greg's bass amp. And I just played with an empty Madison Square Garden. I played an open E chord and just stopped and just went, fuck, wow. That's a huge room, you know, and then I just did another chord and a G and then an A, and then I looked round at Jerry and I just started playing down, 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 and Jerry started 1, 2, 3. He was into it, so it was just as the intro to the song. That's how it starts, and then Greg joins in on bass. And then we're going over and over that. And then Steve is at the mixing console, just, you know, talking to the engineer out there. And I just see this diminutive figure running from the soundboard to the sea, jumped up on the stage, didn't even pick a guitar up. And he said, hold on the E. And so we held. And he went, I don't need. That was it. That was it. And we arranged it that day, that sound check, and we did it that night.
Guy,
and fought over the publishing for the next 30 years.
No, it's Ashford and Simpson.
I'm going to ask a fellow fan, actually, but because of this question. Guy, what was the magic of Frampton Comes to Life? Because everyone had to have that album. I mean, it was...
Yeah, you absolutely had to have it. It was, well, because it was... It managed to, because this was Radio 1 time, and so there was the world of rock, you know, like I said, I was very young. There's the world of rock music, which is something that existed in the music press and your mates and records. And then there was pop music, which was on the radio. And then very rarely there were things that would straddle that world. You know, there was Bowie and Roxy and stuff that straddled those worlds. And Frampton Comes Alive did exactly that. It ticked every single box. And there's this guy, there's an amazing Les Paul, and it's a proper, and he plays these incredible solos. And that, you know, and it's, I think that you hit the absolute sweet spot there of like all the girls could dig it, and it had it all, and it had the talk box.
Oh yes.
But for me, I think also the world of a certain age, especially in America, but all went, that's me on the record. That's my euphoria screaming back at him, you know, and it was the most feel-good thing. And of course it was fantastic because it wasn't like, oh, let's go and see him play live. It was like, I want to be in that record. And that's why people came to see you.
A lot of people have actually come and said, I was in there, you know. Woody Harrelson was there. At the recording at Winterland.
Oh, really?
And what was the other guy? The comedian that did BBC One, BBC Two, BBC One.
Oh, Michael Myers.
Mike Myers was there too, because I got left out of Wayne's World 3. I think I did a little shoot with him for that. But so I got to talk with the two of Dana Carvey and him and.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was there, you know, and it just blew my mind.
But of course, while we're on the showbiz angle, you are part of that absolutely elite club who have been immortalized in The Simpsons.
Ah, yes. I thought they had the wrong number when they called me up, actually, because nothing.
They gave you a flying pig, which I thought was funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
The wrong PF.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, actually, funnily enough, because I remember, actually, Peter, the day when we started the 94 Pink Floyd tour, and we opened it, I think it was in Miami, and there was a thing about it on the news, and you were interviewed about it. And you were very nice, and we were all looking at it in the dressing room going, well, that's really nice, but why?
Exactly.
And maybe that's it. It's PF. That must be.
Yeah, there you go. No, they said they'd found it at that my crew had found it at a Pink Floyd yard sale. So that was where it was. That's where it had come from.
How did you cope with the huge success and then the demands on having to write another record and all of that sort of stuff?
Well, I think there were 2 phone calls I got. I mentioned them in the book. As the first call I got was probably in April. The album had come out in January, and we were #1 and in Billboard and all the charts, and the album. And so my manager called me and said, "You sitting down?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're #1." I said, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic." I was so inspired by that, because that's incredible, And so then I don't know how much longer it was, a month or something, or 2, and I got the second call. We didn't speak much. No.
Fire.
No.
My agent called me at home.
I got the second call, and he goes, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Again?" He said, "Yeah, sit down." He said, "You've just surpassed Tapestry's Carole King's record.
Wow.
You've sold more albums. You're the biggest selling album of all time in America. Well, anywhere." And that's when I got scared.
Yeah.
Because I'm not as prolific a writer as I would like to be sometimes, and it took me 6 years worth of material. If you think of Shine On from Humble Pie, then the cream of the crop from all the solo records, and a Stones cover, and that was it. But it took me 6 years to garner all that stuff, so all that good material. So I knew they would like badgering me immediately. You got to start writing for another album. Got to do another album. And I'm thinking, why would we want to do another album with the biggest selling album of all time? Why wouldn't? And then I always think about the Eagles. You think they've had 50 studio albums out, but they've had 7. And the rest are compilations.
Yeah.
So they know there's 2 reasons why those guys don't go near the studio till they're ready. It's one, they can't stand each other, and secondly, they're not going to go near the studio until they've got like 10 hit songs. Their quality control is super high, and so that's the way I've always felt. So it was difficult at that point. I felt I'd lost before I'd started with the next record, which shouldn't have been made for another 3 years at least.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember here, it's one of those things, I actually remember where I was. I was in a shop on the Strand, and because I remember hearing Signed, Sealed, Delivered, which is a great version. But I remember my first thought was, but why has this guy put out a cover? He's such a great writer. So, but that's obviously what was going on, yeah.
Well, we were doing Roadrunner and Signed, Sealed, Delivered in the stage act as a medley, and so that's why we recorded that. In fact, Stevie Wonder came to the studio to do a harmonica solo on one of the tracks of I'm and You, and while he was there, I played him very nervously. I played him Signed, Sealed, Delivered. And he was dancing around, he loved it. And then he said, "You know who wrote the lyrics to that with me?" I said, "No." He said, "My mum." So
oh my God.
If you look on the label, there's 2, I forget what his last name is, but there's 2 of them, and it's him and his mum.
Mrs. Wonder.
And yeah, Mrs. Wonder.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Wonder Mum.
Peter, I hold you in the pantheon of great guitar players, with Clapton and Townsend.
Thank you.
There's no question. But I know you took some stick, really, for the sense of becoming such a big pop star, which you did, and the girls suddenly screaming. When I have to say, I think this business can be still, to this day, one of the most sexist business, because there's this kind of group of guys who think if an artist is followed by women or liked by women, then somehow they're not as worthy as artists who are followed only by men. I mean, that has to be sexist, right? I mean,
yes, I think there's even more to it than that, because it works for women as well. If they're too good looking, they can't be a good actress.
Yeah.
But Nicole Kidman and Michelle Pfeiffer have sort of put that to rest now.
So you were too good looking. That was one of your problems.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
You still are, Peter, obviously.
Well, Pete Townsend said very recently to me, sometimes people's beauty can get in the way of the talent,
Wow.
And I said,
So
it
Pete,
works
isn't
for.
it?
Yeah.
That's so Pete, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're still talking to Pete, are you?
Yes, I am. Yes. No, I love Pete, and there's a little story in the book about him. But
yes, we heard that. That's
You would go and tell the story.
come on.
Okay, well, we were around the right time, because this is when it's like the early 80s, and nothing's happening for me. My career's dropped off the cliff, and because a pop star's career is 18 months, a musician's career is a lifetime. So anyway, I've got nothing. I'm having to sell my house, all that horrible stuff. And the phone rings. I'm in New York, and it's Pete. And I say, "Oh man, this is great. How you doing? Good. Well, I've got this idea." He says, I'm leaving. I'm not going to play live with The Who anymore. You're going to take my place." And I went, "Wait a minute. I've already been asked this one before." And let me tell you, I'll use the same line. No, that's a very large pair of shoes. People would kill me. I said, "No, I can't do that, Pete." And he said, "Well, look, I'll be there. I just won't be on stage." So I said, "Well, okay." And I've got nothing going on. And I'm thinking, this is a ridiculous idea. I get off the phone and I go, how ridiculous is it? Because I had nothing going on. So anyway, a couple of days, he said, I said, "That's right. Have you spoken to Roger and John about this?" He said, "Not yet." I said, I think you ought to go and talk with them first, and then, could you call me back? Because it's a lovely thought. I'm honored, but I don't think it's a great idea. So, a couple of days goes by, nothing. A week goes by. 2 weeks goes by. 3 weeks goes by. My wife, who can't stand me anymore, says, "For Christ's sake, call him up." So I find him in a studio somewhere in London, and he said, "Oh, hello, Pete." That's all he got out, and the rest was me ranting, basically saying, I've got nothing going on, and you ask me to replace you in The Who, then you don't call me back, So it was, and so but the lovely, well, there's more than one end to the story, but the end at that period was that we went to see Springsteen, and we went backstage, Madison Square Garden in New York, and after that phone call, and so we went backstage halftime, and there's Pete talking to Bruce. So I just went and stood, just sidled up to him and stood next to Pete. I didn't say anything. And of course he's taller than me. And so he suddenly realized that someone is standing next to him. And I'm just looking at him smiling, looking up at him. And he just looked over at me, big smile on his face. And he just kissed me on the top of my head. As if to say, "I'm sorry." And we've spoken since then, obviously, many times. But he didn't mind it being in the book.
I'm slightly wary of your time, Peter, but I can't let you go without, we have to ask you about playing with David Bowie and how your life kind of come full circle from being a kid. I mean, there's a wonderful clip on YouTube, if no one has seen it before, of David Bowie and Peter Frampton looking for a beer in Madrid.
That's Barcelona, isn't it?
Barcelona, Madrid, Barcelona. And you two are just two kids from school.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us your Bowie stories.
Well, I mean, we went to school together.
Well, your dad was his art teacher, right?
Yes, for over 3 years. Yeah. And David became a sort of family friend because of my dad and then me. So we started, jamming at school when I was probably 13 and he was maybe 15 or 16. I think he's was a couple of years older than me. And then obviously we were good friends, but he went off, did his thing, and David Jones and the Nighttimers, and then David Bowie in the Lower Third, and all these things, and we'd be on the same show but different times, and so we saw each other. And then it was the mid-'80s. I just got back on the road after nothing happening for a while, obviously, and I just opened for Stevie Nicks. I'd put a record out called Premonition, first one with Atlantic, and Dave calls up and says, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Great." He said, "Doc, I just heard Premonition. Your playing's great again, and please, would you come and do some for me?" I said, "What?" I said, "Finally? We're going to play together." He said, "Again?" And he said, "Yeah, would you come and help me on Never Let Me Down, my new record?" So I did that. While I was there in Switzerland, he asked me, "Look, I'm doing," and he showed me photos of a model of the Glass Spider stage, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is huge." And he said, "Would you join me on guitar?" And I said, "Oh wow, let me just think of yes." And but the beauty of it, I didn't realize what he was doing. He had seen along the way. We'd got together a couple of times during my big heyday period, and he'd seen what was going on, and he'd seen that I wasn't reinventing myself like I should, and that all hell had broken loose as far as my career hitting the skids. And so he gave me this gift of, he could have had any guitar player, come and do that. But he chose me at that time. And we went around the world in stadiums, and then when it was winter in arenas, literally a couple of times. And he reintroduced me as the guitar player to the world with him, which was a very selfless thing, I thought, that he did for me. We've always been like, he was always like my older brother. And even later on after that, when I was doing my instrumental record, which that's the only album they gave me a Grammy for because I didn't sing. And and I needed a sax player, and Dave's a great sax player, but I knew he would know the guy of the moment that would be the great sax player to introduce on my record. And he said, "Oh, you got to call Courtney Pine. He's phenomenal." And so I did. And so Dave was still advising me along the way. He was always a great, he was an ideas man, obviously. So
yeah. We all missed him.
Oh,
I mean, you
God.
played on stage with him as well, didn't you, Guy?
I did, yeah. Well, his penultimate live performance, he came and did Arnold Lane and Comfortably Numb with David Gilmour at the Albert Hall. Funny.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
We just you've surpassed all of that stuff now, PZ. But you've become a national treasure now, haven't you? Really, people really are, flocking to see you, and it's you're where you deserve to be. I feel now. Do you feel comfortable apart from obviously what you're going through physically?
Yes,
you must be happy with the way everything turned out in the end.
I think it's like, don't drink a wine before it's time. I guess it sunk in with a lot of people that dismissed me for satin pants and a bare chest, in the 70s. That all just fades away. And I think what's left is the music and the playing. And that's what it's always been for me.
Absolutely. But the thing is, what's great, Peter, as you said, because with the fullness of time, that as time sort of concertina's in, so now people look back and see that, the Frampton comes alive, Peter. But then, of course, you had such a huge legacy before that, and it's fantastic. That's all kind of in focus now. So,
Well, thank you
and
very
it's
much.
an honour to talk to you.
I was watching you trading licks this afternoon. I was watching you it's just like a film of you just last year with Eric Clapton on stage in Dallas. Oh my God, man. I mean, and I talk about trading licks. You and Carlos Alomar doing Gene Genie on a Glass Spider tour. I mean, one day I'd love to be up there. Whether or not I would trade licks very well is another thing. But
who knew?
Stage with you, it's such a great honor. Listen, and I hope you get to come back to England soon, and we all get to get over this thing and get our vaccines, and the whole world can start watching you play again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Well, from your lips, I really hope so, because, I can't not say goodbye to my home country. There's just no way. So if I can do that, that will be phenomenal. And then if I can go further, I'll go to South America, I'll go to Australia, I'll go to I want to go and say goodbye to all the fans, and I just hope. I have a couple of clocks working against me, the COVID clock, and then my IBM clock, which is slowing me down. And so I've got to slow the IBM clock down so that we can speed the COVID clock up so we get that vaccine.
Yeah. Well, listen, Peter, if you ever get a call from me asking you to join Spandau Ballet, don't get too excited, all right?
No, but I
don't even call me.
Yeah, no, but if you do the Craze #2, I'll be in that one.
Yeah. Listen,
Then can I just say something? That was a phenomenal movie. You were wonderful, and your brother. So,
thank you so much, Peter. What a pleasure it has been talking to you.
Oh, same here. Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed
Really
this.
great. Yeah, really great, Peter. Fantastic. Thank you. That's it's such a big part of any one of our generation's rite of passage. So, thank you for everything.
Well, thank you, and I hope we can all get together in a year, or hopefully whatever. It's going to be at least a year, but and catch up. That will be wonderful.
Absolutely.
All right, all the best, sir.
All the very best to you, Peter.
Oh, thanks so much.
Oh, wasn't that wonderful, Gary?
Oh, wow. I mean, what a nice man. I mean, really. And what, just an experience it was to talk to him. I felt kind of bad for him in many ways, because he never got that sort of credit he deserved as being up with all those powerful, ego guys, back in the 70s.
I know. I've got a nasty feeling that he might just have been a nice guy. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of might be the problem.
That's been our problem, right, Guy? That's been our problem.
Yeah, it has been my problem. You, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, that was a dream, and So anyway, we're moving.
The temptation, though, when you said about not necessarily wanting to trade licks with him, and this, of course, Gary Kemp. Who knew he could play guitar like that?
Who knew? Which is my middle name.
Yes. I should point out to the listeners what that comes from is that every review from Nick Mason's Sauce Full of Secrets, there's always a bit where they go, Gary Kemp, who knew he could play guitar like that? Yeah. So Gary has become quite annoyed with that.
Well, no, I'm happy. My mother knew. You
love it.
My mother knew.
Yes.
Anyway, listen, I look forward to seeing you actually, we're doing another one of these very soon, because we're cramming them in before Christmas. We're going to have a lot more. Go to our channel, go to our podcast on your favorite channel, and subscribe to us and put a review if you can. We are loving doing this, and we don't want to stop.
Well, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from her.
Very good.